Gone solo. No, not in recruitment, just in the podcast. Here's the second episode of Tea Time Talent Acquisition. It's a solo host and guest, shall I say, for myself. Anyways, I spent half an hour talking about process and where process stops serving us, or stops serving the candidates, shall we say. Here is a little bit from the episode. Now, when you say about is it process, not serving the people, it's like when does control become the bottleneck? Because I feel like process it's put in place for us to have control, right? It's to know where things are, and process often emerges to we try to minimize risk. Like we try to ensure that we get back to people in a timely fashion. We give them that feedback, or at least we reject them from the process. And we know where they are in the stages of the hiring process. We know who last spoke to them. We know what the feedback was. And so this is where it helps to minimize risk. But when unchecked, they become too rigid. And the whole system stifles agility as a company. Consider from the candidate's perspective. So is your process welcoming? Is it clear? Is it human? Are the tone of your emails reflective of your business? Do you have touch points embedded into your process that's going to build interest? Or are we just creating tick box exercises? I genuinely believe that a one-stage process is horrendous and a five-stage process is also horrendous. And there's an equal part that we need to work out what serves us as businesses and what serves the candidate, and find that fine line. It is a very fine line, and it will absolutely depend on your business. So I'm not here to advocate for one way or the other. I'm also not here to blame anyone where process becomes hindrance. But I'm here to really think about how do we change? How do we stop it going too far? And that's really what we focus in on this episode. And I do hope that you come away with it thinking a little bit differently around maybe how you can start changing how your process looks, or ultimately, if you don't need to, how you can celebrate those successes and keep going. But thank you as always for trusting us and for returning. And I do hope you enjoy the episode. Give me as much feedback as you can, because like I said, it's my second solo one done. And sometimes I feel like I ramble with it. But enjoy. Thank you. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, a podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be flying this one solo again. I realise it's been about a year since I last did a podcast by myself, and don't get me wrong, I love the guests that I have on, but sometimes there's a burning topic that I want to also get across to you. And, I've been in recruitment now for 12 years. I've had the absolute pleasure to work with some amazing companies, really watch them thrive from a recruitment perspective, from a strategic perspective. It's really one of the best jobs in the world. We get to help so many people off the back of this. But there's something that's been kind of coming up time and time again, and I think it's only got worse really with the adoption of AI. And I really want to kind of get this point across now so we can really start thinking logically, how can we improve before it gets too far gone? And that's really around the topic of process, right? Now, external recruiter here, don't shoot me in the sense of I don't advocate for a one-stage process. I don't want that. I think that's also equally terrible, right? But what I'm really thinking around is, when does process stop serving people and people being the candidates, right? Are we creating these amazingly well-documented hiring processes that simply fail to serve us in the right way? It's not driving connection. It's not being human enough. And I think yes, if I'm honest, I think for a large portion of teams right now, they've fallen trap of this. And I see it, and I see where it goes wrong. And it's challenging because, we have all these elements that we have to focus on, from compliance and GDPR to any legal rights that we can or cannot share, depending on your geographic location. There's all these things you have to think about. And then talent acquisition teams are short-staffed. You've got loads of requests coming in, and you have to do sourcing and scheduling, and you've got all these types of kind of responsibilities on your head. So I'm not blaming anyone. I just think we've fallen trap. And I think it's quite an easy fix, in honesty. But it will take some time, and it takes businesses to really sit back and go, yeah, that's us. So look, this podcast really isn't going to be for everyone, but it's going to be for those who want to think maybe have we fallen down that route, and then I'm going to pose some suggestions of how to unblock it. Because I've seen some fantastic teams do this, and it's worked tremendously. And I'm hoping I can kind of give that advice to you, and you can sit back with your teams and go, okay, how do we improve for the rest of 2025 or 2026? So, look, from my side, before we kind of dive into all of this, I've also realized that I ask everyone the same question at the beginning of my podcasts. You know, what do you feel makes a successful, high-performing talent acquisition team? I was speaking to a lady called Julie. So she runs the talent acquisition team for this AI SaaS product that we're hiring for in Germany. So she posed it to me, and it got me thinking. I was like, yeah, I've never actually really answered that. So I'm going to answer it first. One of them is process, right? But that's, I think, secondary. I think primarily, you definitely need the right people in place. You need sales people, in my opinion, right? You need people who love getting on that phone and speaking to people. Now, recruitment is a sales job, you know, in my view. You know, you are constantly trying to understand, is this person right for us and what we need right now? And we're trying to sell each other to each other, right? So first of all, you need to have dedicated salespeople. And then secondary to that, processes come in place, and it's processes that support them to do their jobs in terms of selling, not lead them down the path of administration. So we want to remove as many of those admin tasks. Now I know everyone's sitting there going, "Great, Eden, AI is doing that." That's the kicker here. Is it? Have we now gone too process heavy? We're still not doing the selling. That's the big question I'm trying to uncover, because I think once you get the right balance, that creates the high performing team. You've got the systems in place that are helping. Then you've got the recruiters who want to do the selling. And I'm not saying, you know, we all don't want to sell. Of course, this is our job, right? But I'm talking about people who live and breathe it. You know, they wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and like, cannot wait. I cannot wait to call that candidate. Or they get a rejection and they're taking it personally, right? And don't get me wrong, when I say personally, I'm not saying they're starting to throw things and get emotionally charged around it, but you know, they use that as a driver. Go, okay, I need to find a better person. I need to go out there again. They're the hardcore sales. Now, not everyone does that. And don't get me wrong, we all have days when we are like that, and we all have days when we're not like that. But I'm talking about high performing teams, consistent high performing teams. You need to have some of those individuals in there. Then you make up the remainder of your team with obviously people who can learn from them and from thrive from them. And that's how you create a well-rounded high performing team. If you have no one in your team that's like that, what would, you know, how can we get those people there? That would be my question. But to me, that's what makes high performing teams, at least the ones I've seen. And you can make, you know, hundreds of hires with a handful of recruiters like that, instead of the other way around. The process, like I said, is very heavy here, and that's really what I want to talk about. And really, it's, you know, when you say about, is it process, you know, not serving the people, it's like, when does control become the bottleneck? Because I feel like process it's put in place for us to have control, right? It's to know where things are. And process often emerges to, you know, we try to minimize risk. Like we try to ensure that we get back to people in a timely fashion. We give them that feedback, or at least we reject them from the process. And we know where they are in the stages of the hiring process. We know who last spoke to them. We know what the feedback was. And so this is where it helps to minimize risk. But when unchecked, they become too rigid. And the whole system stifles agility as a company. Now, in a bigger corporation, maybe you can get away with it. But in small scale or scale ups, too much process, I think it sends certain messages to candidates. And a few of the things that I feel like it really implements, right? And I've seen it firsthand, it's actually costing that business, you know, time, money, resources, or whatever, or circumstances. And these are literally taken from the last 6 months of processes that I've been involved in, where I've seen it firsthand. Either, you know, my candidates were in a system, in the process, or the company itself, their applicants were in the same situation. Because again, you know, the teams I hire for, we speak quite openly. We have these retrospectives around the hiring processes, and you learn and you see where things went wrong and when they went right. So in the last 6 months alone, I've seen missed hires. I think a real obvious example that I can kind of share with you, a business introduced a logic test to all candidates, which is fine, but basically what it then filtered out were, how can someone perform in a 14-minute exercise where they have 30 seconds to answer a question instead of that person has 8 years of managing teams and you're looking for a manager. And that person didn't even get the chance to speak because they failed at a 14-minute logic test that they've worked for scaling companies, etc. So it's clear black and white for me that is a missed opportunity. Was that hire the right hire? I do not know. None of us know because they never got the chance to speak. Seen slowed pipelines, so ATS blockages, as I would call them, where we've had an abundance of candidates in stage one, and it's a huge blockage to try and clear them. Saw a post literally yesterday when I before obviously hopped onto this, where a lady posted on a Friday. It's a tech role. I don't know the actual role it was. Posted on a Friday. Come to Monday, had to close the role. Had 1,300 applicants. She did break down in the process the percentages of relevancy, and it worked out to be 6% of the total applicants actually relevant. Still 6% of 1,300. It's still quite a high percentage to get through, but she had to go through every single applicant to really understand that's a lot of people. Now, she done it. So that wasn't actually a blockage. But I've seen many cases where 1,300 come in, you don't go for everyone. And you can't. Right? I'm not saying you personally, whoever's listening, but you simply cannot. There is not enough time in your day to do that multiple times a week with your live jobs, right? So we have these blockages that happen where, we have so many in stage one, then we move X amount to short list or long list, X amount to short list, X amount to interviews, and then we have a few people interview, but the rest of the system stops. It just holds until this moves. And the perfect candidate could be sitting there. And I've seen it, like I said, it slows pipelines down because we're waiting for the system or people to update the system. Another example could be interview feedback, right? Someone's had the interview on a Thursday. We still don't have feedback by Tuesday on the system. We're chasing. And so many times I know talent acquisition, this is a big frustration for you guys because you're chasing your hiring managers, but they still don't have feedback. And you're sat in limbo, candidates sat in limbo. And again, it's because there was a process in place that the hiring manager, whoever interviewed, had to follow a form. They had to give this specific feedback, and they should. Don't get me wrong, they should. But again, process comes into place where they're not for whatever reason, and it slows things down. That will ultimately lead to a damaged brand. Right? You've got candidates who are in process for too long, or they get no feedback, or they get a boilerplate, templated feedback, and that creates a very damaged brand. There's one that's been circulating around. It's actually there's two, right? One is a template where it literally says template rejection email, say something about the candidate's feedback to reject them, and then say, we'll keep them warm even if we won't. Something along the lines of that, and it's just doing the rounds on LinkedIn. Obviously, an incredibly damaging template, and we would all like to think we wouldn't do that. It only takes one mistake, one unchecked template to go out, and then boom, it's out for everyone. The other thing is ATS dormancy, where for whatever reason, we haven't closed the job or we haven't rejected the pipeline. And the other example is it's been doing the rounds where someone got rejected. I think it was like 2 years after they'd applied for the job, which is mental, right? Again, how damaging is that to your brand? Whereas we've just filled the role. It's like, we didn't. I applied 2 years ago. And how quickly things go viral now and how quickly people jump onto the bandwagon. You have to really be mindful. Are we designing these processes for us as recruiters, or are we designing it for the human that's on the other side of it to hopefully go into hire, right? So we've got all these templates, we've got automated triggers, we've got structured forms for feedback, we've got the must-ask questions in every single stage, we've got the adoption of AI. So are we prioritizing process over the diligency of understanding who this person is and the selling to them? That's what I want you to really think about your process, right? Because if you are prioritizing the selling, great. Stop now, please, because the rest of this is going to talk about process heavy, right? So if you feel you're not, and some indicators are going to be, got a high time to hire. If we're at 60, 70 days time to hire, maybe it's a process problem. You're chasing, hiring managers or interviewers for feedback, always potentially a process problem or training problem. If you have negative reviews on, all the review sites around your interview process, again, let's look Let's have an honest spotlight into this. And there's no one to blame, and that's the beauty of this process, because a company hiring process, we as talent acquisition enforce it, but we're not just people who just do, right? We're business partners. So this is our field, this is our specialty. We should have a seat at the table to decide how it gets created, and the vast majority of listeners do. But then, like I said, for whatever reason, it goes unchecked for too long, and that's when these problems start to creep in. So how can we actually create a more human focused approach? Now, what I've seen worked really well before was when you map your journey outside in, right? And what I mean by that is that you consider candidates' perspective first before you think of all the tools and systems. Now, again, a lot of you listening have the tools and systems already. So this does make it a little bit more harder for you. So for the argument of this exercise, when you do it, just ignore them. Right? Just ignore they don't exist. Or pretend you've just joined the company for the first time. Again, that's quite a nice way to look at it. And you're not too rigid because you don't know that they use Ashby or Greenhouse, or haven't seen all the templates that they've created or whatever, right? You just map your journey. What does a good journey look like? What does a great journey look like? What's the best journeys that you've had look like? And Upvest do this very well. So Cassia, who's one of our former guests, she does this with interview training. So we're talking about the whole process, and interviewing comes into part of that. But she got her stakeholders to think, what's the best interview you've ever had? Why was it the best interview? What's the worst? And really ask these open questions, not just to herself, but she asked it to her stakeholders, so people who joined the company recently. Because again, what we want to do is build out best process for function. But we don't work in engineering. We don't work in operations. We don't work in, the marketing team. We can talk about it. We can hypothesize about it. But the best person who's going to talk about marketing is the social media manager you just hired. Or the first person who's going to talk about the engineering on a senior level is going to be that architect you've just hired, right? So these are treasure troves of information. So map the processes out, create like a standardized, this is what we want the business processes to best to look like, and then you can kind of individualize for the types of positions if you needed to. But what you want to do, like I said, consider from the candidate's perspective. So is your process welcoming? Is it clear? Is it human? Are the tone of your emails reflective of your business? Do you have touch points embedded into your process that's going to build interest? Or are we just creating tick box exercises? Fly, template, schedule, template, offer. Think about that. How different is that going to be, where instead of having template, you have a reminder to send a text, WhatsApp message, quick call. You might feedback someone directly after the first interview, second interview, whatever, right? And these are those little touch points. Sorry, they're so powerful, so powerful. I have had candidates rejected on final with the worst feedback ever, in the sense of literally none, right? Because the company refused to provide feedback for whatever reason, right? But the candidates, they take it in grace. They're more resilient than we think sometimes. But those little touch points that I embed in my process allows me to create a very strong connection with them, where they still work with me. Or they still might go back to that company in the future if I posed it to them. It's not a closed door, because we've kept them warm. We've kept them excited. It wasn't right for this process, whatever, right? So those little touch points are the human side. So how do we build them in? That's what we're going to look at. The other thing is obviously rewriting the voice of your process. And what I mean by that is all these templates that you're created, replace these auto responses with warm messages. It shows intent, right? So these are, like I said, a little bit about those touch points. So the difference between having someone provide you with, feedback on the phone, or if they're open to it on the phone, day later, compared to templated rejection or basic, even if it's like success, right? Even just like you proceeded a week later. It's so different. On a call, you can highlight empathy, you can build interest in the right ways. You show that you show the candidate that they are more than a candidate. It shows that they are human to you. You know, you're doing that emotional check with them, and you can hear in their tone as well. How do they feel about you? You know, are they gutted they didn't get the job with you? If so, maybe you've got someone who's genuinely interested in the business, but there's a potential opportunity in the future that you could still utilize. They'll remember that you gave them the call and you gave them the feedback. On the flip side, say they are interested in proceeding. If you just send a message just saying, "Great news, Eden, you know, we're going to schedule the final," you know nothing about their other processes. You know nothing about what they're feeling about you. You know, they might have just had some news which prevents them from proceeding forward. You know, yeah, they might tell you, but you could have got that straight away. You could have gone back to your hiring manager and said, "We've got a problem here. They can't start on this date, but they can start on this date." We can start selling. We change the narrative of that person, right? Another example could be that they might have seen your Glassdoor reviews. All of a sudden, they've popped up and they don't like what they see, but they're easily discussable. And I've had this before. I won't name the company. Berlin-based music tech. Their Glassdoor reviews were horrendous, right? And they knew that. I knew that. So we tackled it straight away on the first call with the candidates. We said, "Look, you're going to go to Glassdoor. Everyone does. Most people do, at least, anyways, right? And you're going to see this, and you're going to see this. And let me tell you why it's there. And the company know it's there. And this is what we're doing to change the narrative of it. Not change what happened. Can't change that. But we can change how we are moving forward. We can change who we are moving forward. And this is how." And we had no drop-offs off the base of Glassdoor reviews. That was one of their biggest blockers before, because that's the human side of it. Recognizing there's a potential issue there. Just talk to them about it, human to human, and see how they feel. And again, you can hear, you can see, does it alleviate or does it heighten pressure or kind of anxiety around them? So these touch points, like I said, they're crucial. And if they won't have a call with you, fair enough, you're going to have to send an email. But as best as you can, you want to speak to as many of your live candidates as humanly possible, as often as you can. Even like I say, if it's just a text message in the morning of an interview saying, "Aiden, you're going to smash it. Best of luck." Now, if you do it to everyone, it's not bias. If you do it to one or two, yeah, that's a bias process, right? So you got to be fair to everyone. Everyone needs the same support. So if you're going to do it for one, you've got to do it for all. Now, obviously, then Blitz, our next question is, well, I don't have as much time to do that. In my opinion, unless you're hiring hundreds of people or 10 a month and you've got hundreds of people in process, like you're doing high volume recruitment, which a lot of the listeners don't do from who we have and who responds to me, then in theory you should be able to do this because I do it. I'm in the same job as you. And you know, we have similar number of requirements from the conversations I have with TA specialists. So it's absolutely doable. It takes 10 to 15 minutes per candidate, and usually I have 3 a day, 4 a day, right? And it takes about an hour of my day, fair enough. If I really want to do it thoroughly and then send a nice email after and I want to make it a human touch point. But like I said, these little touch points change the process dramatically. At the end of the process, I know exactly where they are. That person's taking it or that person's not taking it. And I can comfortably go to my stakeholder and say, "You're not going to get him. Or you are. Or she doesn't want that salary, she needs this." And it's not me just trying to be a recruiter to say, "Hey, give us a couple of extra thousand." It's you want her, you have to pay this because she has this opportunity on the table. These are why she's interested in you. This is why she's interested in the other company. You are preference marginally. It's going to come down to the money. Not every company wants to hear it, but that's the truth, and that's the sales part. We're coming in with the information. So what that's really ultimately leading to, I would say, is kind of we're thinking about bringing someone into the process, not just through the process. So we're not just shipping them in and going, "See you later. You know, here's a 1,000-step process. Good luck." But we're really taking a step back and going, "I represent you and I represent the business. What can I do to help?" That's our role, right? How can I help? And I know a lot of times I speak with talent acquisition specialists, you know, they always do tell me that I'm an advocate for the candidate. Great. And I want you to be an advocate for the candidate. But still, process stops you from being a human to the candidate and we're just hiding behind emails, it doesn't matter how much you advocate for them after that first call. You don't know what's happening as that process unfolds, right? So a little few resources I think that can help get buy-in more into your company and the candidate to buy in more to you as a recruiter. Because again, what you want to make them your friend as much as you can, because then you can not change their decision. I think, people need to make their own decision. But if they're your friend, they're going to lean on you for advice. And you work for the company. So if your company really wants that person, and Eden's coming to you saying, look, what do you think? Well, obviously, you can subtly sell. Like, you told me you wanted X, Y, and Z, and actually the team are offering that. You didn't want this, and fair enough, we are offering that like that. Is that a deal breaker for you? No, it's not. When does it become a deal breaker? Well, all these conversations start unfolding, and then your guide and you're advising. This is standard recruitment. Don't get me wrong, but like I said, outside of first interview template, second interview template. Again, from the phrase at the beginning, I'm not advocating for a one-stage process. This would not work in a one-stage process. You cannot build enough interest. Now, for freelancers, contractors, yeah, one stage, get it moving. But for permanent, the focus is to find people that are truly valuing your business, driven by the mission, right? So you really want to have these touch points. And you're also going to find they're going to share more to you. And if they share something that you feel actually, oh, it's really absolutely against where we are as a business, because you found out outside of the hiring process, might have saved yourself a recruiter cost, might have saved yourself a headache having to replace that role in the future. Right. So don't just ship people through the process. And a few resources that I think work really wonders. So the touch points to build interest, background, personality, do at the weekend, they're family orientated, these sorts of things. It doesn't stop someone from being hired, but it helps you build deeper rooted connections. I have a daughter. I think the vast majority of people I speak to now know I have a daughter. And it's not because I'm one of those parents that will just want to shove it down your face and say, hey, I'm a dad, listen to me. No, it's like the vast majority of people that I work with are parents. And it's that subtle connection. There's an understanding. If I'm late to a meeting or I've got a screaming child in the background, they understand. And it's the same thing with candidates, right? What did you do at the weekend? I took my kids to the park. Brilliant. I just found a really nice park. Let me send it to you. Or, come on holiday. I've just got back from a nice holiday. Again, haven't always just done that, but of course, if it works, you send it to them, you build in that relationship. So those touch points work. Interview prep resources. I know a lot of teams share just a short blurb about, what's expected. I think we can do better. So what we do is we share the company, of course, the job description, interviewer or interviewers, and we share their LinkedIn, and we advise always to go and check them out. We send the objective or full should look like based on what we know, based on feedback, based on what the stakeholders have shared. Any particular areas of feedback based on their resume or first interview or second feedback interview that we can share to them. And then any pointers that I would just suggest that they look at. So if there's a values web page, if there's a news article, if there's a whatever, right? And we always do two things. We always have a call with a candidate to run through that email. Then they can ask me any questions. I can advise them based on what I know about the business. Say, look, this is what they generally like. They like, clear, concise, controllable answers, whatever it is. And then we always follow up with that email. And it gives them two opportunities. One, to ask me questions on the phone, to really dig into, what they need to know. On the email, they can also come back if they have any other questions. I always do this 2 to 3 days before an interview starts. So they've got time to absorb that information and then do their own prep and homework, right? And those interview preps, like I said, are super powerful. You really start to understand how engaged is this person, right? Are they responding to me timely? Are they taking time out of their day? And the ones that don't, they're not necessarily bad candidates. But we hire far, far few of those that choose to not have the support, not because our support is the best of the best and, it's going to get you a job or not, but it's buying signals. And usually they've accepted other offers elsewhere. Which is fine. We're all adults, right? Life happens. Are we being transparent with timelines? I think a lot of the time I see it on websites where it states the hiring process, right? So expect feedback in 2 days from here, then this, and this. Rarely are they stuck to. And again, that's because ATS blockages, feed process heavy, whatever. So there is a change. Are we being transparent enough into why that change exists? So don't get me wrong, people go on holiday unexpectedly, it seems. People are sick more unexpectedly, which is fine. I had one recently. There was a delay in the investment being signed off. It's fine, right? It happens. So there's a delay in process or a delay in hiring. If they're stuck in limbo in that ATS matrix that has a template email, they're not going to know. So if you've got a delay, are we calling them or are we messaging them saying, hey, Edom, I'm really sorry about this. It's going to be another week of feedback. Obviously, this has happened X, Y, and Z. How are things going your side? Do we have time, or how your other process is going? And these little touch points. If we put enough friend credits throughout the process, they'll come back and say, no, we don't have time, or yes, we do, or okay, let's see how we can do. And they can delay if they're really interested. Again, it's buying signals. Are you being transparent? Because I can guarantee not everyone is sitting there and going, this is the reason why there's a delay in process. It shows again that you as a company value a person's time and you're being human to that person. Another thing is honest post-interview feedback. I guess how many of us are genuinely open to honest feedback? We might have made a successful hire or not. Are we asking every single candidate for feedback? Again, there's some teams that deploy just a very simple survey, which is, I think, a nice easy route into this. Better route could be having someone or the team dedicated, especially if they've gone like second interview and above, like just some allocated time per week where you proactively try to call people. And again, calling them out the blue for feedback's weird. I do get that. So wouldn't advise that, but you maybe block them. So you maybe send some emails on a Monday and say, look, are you free to have a call for 5 minutes on a Friday? I'd like to share feedback to you and you can share feedback to us. And it's this mutual respect of we both want to improve. And then as a collective team, you back your feedback on a Friday afternoon. That could be a way that works where you get feedback about your process, you provide feedback, you create more human touches, and it's not disrupting your week too much because you're only sending some emails in the morning on a Monday and you're doing your calls on the Friday. Could be a way to get some honest post-interview feedback where you might see blockages or feedback come up that you hadn't anticipated. Again, it's just that feedback loop. And then ultimately what we do after all of this is we put ourselves in the candidate's shoes, we map out our process, is we then see how this fits into our company's systems. So what we do with Ashby or Greenhouse or insert whatever system you want here to help create these processes that are more human-centric. Okay, yes, we've got to have our predefined interview structure. Yes, our sourcing kind of funnel probably isn't going to change too much. But can you build out these templates or these little touch points that might say WhatsApp message instead of templated email? And are those messages, are those emails, are those calls robotic? Are they sounding artificial? No pun intended, right? Or are you being genuine? Are you texting the person or speaking to the person like you would one of your stakeholders or a friend, right? Maybe less of the friend side. It depends on what friends texts are like. But this is what I'm trying to get at. Really, if you're completely honest to yourself, are you being human to this to everyone? Or do you just pick and choose when we're doing it? So there's a big difference, I think, that we need to understand is that, being fast and being frictionless is one thing. And then examining how candidates ultimately suffer for an automated communication system when we don't personalize it. And where's that line between where we're too fast to not build motivation or interest, and it's absolute chaos as a hiring process, and you as talent acquisition have no control whatsoever. We don't know anything's going on because everyone's doing their own thing. We're on Slack, we're on Teams, we're on Ashby, we're on emails, and it's just chaos. That we don't want. Absolutely, we do not want. But on the flip side, like I said, when candidate experience is suffering because we've got automated communication, we're not personalizing it, we're optimizing more for metric than we are for meaningful connections. When we're that way, also too far gone. So what's the middle ground? And like I said, it's outside in, building processes up that make sense based on feedback. It's creating those moments or those touch points that build interest, that allow you to do your job as a recruiter, which is to sell more. And that's where we start really creating these processes that support us instead of hinder us. And that's it from my side, I think. And I don't want this to come across as external recruiter just wants this done and bashing the internal side of things because we need to understand where things are. And absolutely not. I get it, I do. And I've been in both camps and I've seen it work horrendously, both sides. So what I'm advocating for is you need to find that balance that works for your business. A little bit of chaos and a little bit of control, but where? Do not lose the fact that we're speaking to humans and they speak to each other. They post on LinkedIn and they post on Glassdoor, and your brand is on the firing line if we get this wrong. And I do think some teams are getting it wrong right now. But there are some teams who are doing this brilliantly and they're speeding through hiring, and they've got an unbelievable candidate experience where those candidates that are rejected, advocates for them now because they felt heard, they felt special, even if they didn't get the job. And that's what you want. You want people who you reject to still encourage people to apply to you because you made them feel a certain way in that process instead of just automatically rejecting. Do that, you're winning at recruitment, in my opinion. That's it. So if anyone does want to tackle this topic with me and want to have a deeper conversation around process, then feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And other than that, thank you so much for once again trusting us. This is the final episode of the season. So for trusting us this season, if you've stuck around for the whole time, massive thank you. If you've dropped in and out of episodes, still massive thank you. I love doing this. It's genuinely one of the highlights of what I do. I get to work with and connect with so many fantastic people. And I really do hope you enjoy the knowledge that we share. And like I said, these small, one-to-one episodes where I might ramble for half an hour, but hopefully there's some good information in there for you. But thank you so much for joining. I'll see you next time.